Tamara, and today we are going to be making this beautiful summer table runner. The reason why I think it is for summer is because it has these adorable little 3D pinwheels on it. Now, I do have a secret that I'm going to save for the very end of this tutorial, and that secret is a way that you can level up your table runner even more than what you see here. So check that out at the end of this tutorial. If you want, you can easily make this using one single charm pack. So all of these pinwheels and the backing fabric came from one single charm pack. The charm pack that I used came from the Annie's subscription service, and I will link to them in the description down below. There's so many different options that they have that you can use to up your fabric stash that I definitely recommend that you check out. Oh, one more thing. Everything that you need to know as far as the measurements and the seam allowances, all of that, I've written a blog post out, and in that blog post, everything is linked there. All right, let's dive on in. Most charm packs will come with 42 5" by 5" squares. So what I'm doing with my charm pack is I'm taking small stacks at a time, and then I'm cutting them in half and then in half again. If you have a turntable cutting mat, this will go a lot faster for you, and I will link to some of my favorites in the description below. As you can see here, I'm measuring in 2.5 inches, and then I'll turn it and measure in 2.5 inches again. So now you've got a whole set of 2.5 by 2.5 squares, and try to keep them all in order. As you're cutting, just stack them back up all in the same pile. Now, often charm packs will come in a certain order, so you will need to adjust your order a little bit, pull a few different piles out. I didn't want to just match up blues with blues, but purples with blues, that sort of a thing. So I did look for different squares to match together, but the whole time I did this, I still made sure that all 4 stacks of my squares stayed in a certain order. So if I changed up one stack, I would change them all to match. And now for the fun part, we are going to start making our pinwheels. To do this, you'll choose 4 squares to be your pinwheel and just press them in half so that they're all nice triangles. Then grab the 4 squares that you're choosing as your backing fabric and lay them so that they're all nicely lined up. Then you'll take one end of your triangle and you'll fold it inwards, line it up with the bottom corner of one of your squares, and just clip it in place. Do this for all 4 squares so that you have made sure that your pinwheel is turning all in one direction. Now, I do want to pause here and just say, whichever way you choose for your first pinwheel to go, all of your pinwheels should go in the same direction moving forward. So because I'm using a charm pack, it's got 42 squares in it, you've got enough wiggle room to make one set incorrectly, which is exactly what I did. So as you can see here, I've got one pinwheel that's turning in the opposite direction of all the rest of my pinwheels. I don't know how I managed to do this, but I did. All right, once you have all 4 of your pieces clipped in place, then you can sew a basting stitch along those edges to hold it in place before we do this next step. I did that once and found it incredibly tedious. If you do a basting stitch, definitely do an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, because all of the rest of our seam allowances will end up being a 1/4 inch. I opted to avoid the basting stitch, and I would just fold my 2 pieces together, adjust my clips so that they were holding everything in place correctly, and then I sewed a 1/4 inch seam allowance using my 1/4 inch sewing foot along those 2 edges. Now, another thing I highly recommend that you do is you work in bulk. So what I would do is I would make a whole bunch of these, that way I could just sew a whole bunch together at one time. So this is what they'll look like so far, and now you'll just want to press that back seam open. Oh, and another tip I have, because we are working with quite thick seams, I recommend using a tailor's clapper, one like this one here. I'll link to a few in the description down below. And a tailor's clapper, it just lets those seams cool in a more flat way. If you take your iron off, it might still pop up a little bit and cool, so that tailor's clapper just allows the extra heat to cool and do what it needs to do for that seam. Then line up those center seams, clip it in place, and we are going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance along that edge. Once you've sewn that 1/4 inch seam allowance, you're going to do the same thing. You are going to press it open, and again, use that tailor's clapper to let your seams cool as flat as they possibly can. And as you can see, I've got my center seams pressed as best that I can. They do pop up a little bit, but it's not the end of the world. And you've got yourself some adorable pinwheels. Actually, you can see right now the one that is going in the wrong direction. Leave a comment down below and let me know if you can see it. Then it's time to piece all of our pinwheels together. So you will piece the 3 on the right together, then you will piece the 3 on the left together, and then piece the 7 on the top together and the 7 on the bottom together. So you'll have 4 sections of pinwheels once you've completed this. Then press all of these seams open. And now it's time to make our center piece of fabric. So you will need to grab this fabric from your fabric stash, or perhaps you bought a nice matching fabric. I'm just going to use a white, and you'll measure the center 7 sections of pinwheels, and that should measure a little under 29 inches. So just cut a strip of fabric at 29 inches by 4.5 inches. If it's a little bit longer than these 2 strips, that's fine. Just line up your strips on one edge, and then you will attach your strips on either side using that 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then you can trim the excess from that strip away. Once again, press those seams open and then attach your 3 pinwheel strips on either side. Press those final 2 seams open, and now we get to make a quilt sandwich. I do have a tutorial that goes into greater detail walking you through this step, and I also have another tutorial that walks you through how to add binding to a project. So I am going to link to those 2 tutorials down below, and you can check those out for more information. But I will show you here how I decided to quilt my quilt top, although you can quilt it however you want. I used a Hera marker, if that's how you say it, I'm not quite sure, to mark my quilting lines. I will link it in the description down below. I found it incredibly helpful. And then I sewed stitch in the ditch style along the top and the bottom of the strip of fabric that we have in the center there. And then I sewed along these marks that I just showed you here, as well as in between all of my pinwheels. I sewed along them and then down and across, following my marked lines as well. The binding that I made for this table runner, I cut at 2.5 inches wide, and they were long strips from the width of the fabric. Again, I'll link to that tutorial in the description down below. Now for that secret addition that I think will just make this table runner look so good. So yes, this table runner looks finished. It looks beautiful, but there's one more thing that I think you can add to make it just that much cuter. So I have a whole bunch of white buttons that I have collected over the years. They seem to come with every shirt that I buy. I loved the idea of just adding a little white button to the center of every single pinwheel. Every single button is different, but I think it looks so cute. So that's my little extra suggestion. And like I said at the beginning of this tutorial, check out the link to the blog post as well as to the Annie's subscription service if you're interested. I hope that you guys have a wonderful day. Hit that subscribe button so you don't lose me on YouTube, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.